Welcome to Protea Conversations, the podcast where leadership in business and accounting isn't just discussed, it's explored. I'm your host, Zane Stevens, and thank you for joining me as we delve into the minds of some of the most influential leaders in the industry. Our journey is one of discovery, from unraveling the unique stories that shaped our guest careers to invaluable advice that fueled their success. We're here to provide you with simple, actionable advice to accelerate your career and personal growth. Whether you're a budding professional or a seasoned executive, these conversations are designed to offer insight and perspectives that resonate with everyone. So tune in, engage, and be inspired as we build better leaders together. Welcome to Protea Conversations.
Today I'm joined by someone who's not just a seasoned CPA, but a true voice of the accounting profession. Mike Sylvester, based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mike is a partner of SPS CPA Group, where he leads a successful firm specializing in tax planning and compliance for small businesses with 1 to 20 million in revenue. With over 20 years in public accounting, Mike brings deep expertise in business taxation, a no-nonsense approach to client service, and a strong belief in firm improvement through systems and leadership. But he doesn't stop there. Mike is also the co-founder of the Collaboration Room, a growing community for accountants, bookkeepers, and tax pros focused on building better firms. Whether it's operational efficiency, pricing, or leadership, he's helping others move the needle. He's also a recognized voice beyond the profession regarding contributions to Forbes and tax issues, and has earned a solid following, a ridiculously solid following on X, for his direct takes on firm ownership in the accounting landscape. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love doing stuff like this. It's fun.
Yeah, it's I love having these conversations. Honestly, it's one of the most selfish endeavors I have is this podcast because I get to learn so much. But what intrigues me most about you is that a lot of the accountants that I know are from the LinkedIn world, which is the boring world of accounting. And you've made your name on the X space, which, one, I have no idea how that world works. I've got, I try, but I'm absolutely useless at it. And you've seemed to sort of found your groove in that space and become one of the most popular voices on there. You tell it how it is, and people seem to appreciate that.
Most people do. I have a pretty good group. I've got about 4,000 to 5,000 accountants who follow me on X, and it's a lot of fun, honestly.
How did you get into it?
Well, I was bored one day, and it was Twitter at the time, and I went out, and I just started playing around, and it was COVID, and things were kind of tough in the accounting profession, and I really wish that I would have done it before. I pretty much use Twitter as my event space. It's X now, but it started as Twitter. And I'm using it a little less as my event space now. A lot of people use it to market. I largely don't. I largely use it to help other people run their firms. I've been doing this a long time. There's a lot of people who are just starting out who kind of want some help. Accountants tend to be very introverted people. I am not. I only became an accountant in my late 30s. I'm a military veteran. I'm a licensed electrician. I worked in nuclear power plants. I'm the guy that will go to a live CPE session and there'll be 200 people there. Everybody will sit with their friends. And at lunch, I will invade random tables and say, "How, Mike Sylvester, how you doing?" And I'm the only person doing that. We're an introverted group.
No, I get that. I mean, I'm the guy who sits in the back corner quietly by himself, and if somebody approaches me, I will talk to them, but I'm not the greatest of going and knocking up those tables. I'm generally happy in my own thoughts in the background, just taking in the environment and sort of making conclusions based on observations rather than conversations. And, it is interesting that you say you use it as event space, because I use X as sort of my random thought space. And, maybe I'm just in my own head a little bit about it, and I'll put things out there and get 12 impressions, be like, "Oh, that was fun." Get excited when I get 35 impressions on X, and then I'm like, "Yes, that was a good one." But you just started as a venting space, but was there anything that got you going? Have you sort of learned some tips and tricks how to do it, or is it just, this is who I am, this is Mike, I'm going to put it out there, people like it, they don't like it, take it or leave it?
Exactly the latter. There was no plan, no rhyme, no reason, just event space. Like I said, I'm trying to use it less as that now, but I still use it as that to an extent. I enjoy it. It's what I do with some of my spare time when my wife and I are watching TV.
Fair enough. And I can say from seeing you on that space, I always appreciate your posts. They always sort of value add, even if they are just events. There's some good thought behind them. They're really well constructed. And it feels like I'm having a real conversation, and people really get into it as well, which I think is nice, because it can be a bit of a screaming match out there, where yours generally seem a lot more productive rather than just vent and complain.
I try, but sometimes I vent and complain too much. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the charm. So let's talk about it. You sort of brought the intro in, which is, being a veteran, and started in the U.S. Navy, correct?
Yeah, I was a reactor operator on a nuclear submarine. If you're into The Simpsons, I was the guy pulling the rods.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for 6 years. I was stationed in Honolulu at Pearl Harbor. That's where I met my wife. We were both from Indiana, but we met in Honolulu. And the Navy's a very different world, and working in nuclear power in the Navy is a very different world.
I can't even really wrap my head around that job at all. I grew up in South Africa. We didn't really have much of any military army. It all was sort of defunct and in disrepair. So that was never even a process that crossed my mind. But what was the idea of going into the Navy straight out of school?
So what's interesting is I graduated high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I kind of hung around home and was a bum for a couple of years. And eventually I decided I needed to not be a bum, get out of my parents' house, and I actually wanted to join the military. And I actually looked at 3 different professions, and they all recruited me pretty hard. I'm a pretty book smart guy. They're not going to hire me to be a physical specimen because of that. I'm not. It's going to be something mental. And, I looked at being a Navy cryptologist pretty hard. And I looked at the Army CID program pretty hard. My dad talked me out of doing that, and that's a very different world because you're in their criminal investigative division. And my dad was in the Army, and he convinced me not to do that, but said, Mike, everyone will hate you because your job is to catch people doing bad things.
Yeah.
And I took his advice, but I'll tell you in the end, what happened is I was a big Star Trek fan.
Okay. And
I was a big William Shatner fan. And William Shatner did this recruiting video for the United States Navy talking about nuclear power, the final frontier. And I bought it. And I joined the Navy and decided to go into nuclear power. And when I went to A school in Florida, my chief said, hey, man, you should put in for something you're not comfortable with. If you're from the East Coast, you could go to the West Coast. So I volunteered for submarines on the West Coast. Now, submarines are different. If you're claustrophobic, don't go on a submarine. We slept stacked 4 high. And if you're claustrophobic, definitely do not go on a submarine that goes up to the North Pole. I did that once. You're up under the polar ice. You very rarely go up. It is a different run. That's for sure.
My extent of being on a submarine is sort of a ride at Disney where they sort of almost pretend you're underwater. And I was like, yeah, that was enough of that. I'm not sure how long I wanted to spend that time. So how long were you sort of underwater?
The longest I did was almost 5 months.
Wow.
And that is a long time. And back then it was, and even now, you can't communicate. You're allowed to get a certain number of basically the equivalent of telegrams a year from your family.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know what's going on in the world. You just have no idea. I remember, that we would get news about once a week and it'd be like 1,000 words. It'd be like, hey, Green Bay won the Super Bowl. Hey, this country's at war with this country. You did not know what was going on. There was no TV, no radio, no internet. You had no idea what was going on in the world. It was different.
Assuming most of the submarine operators received some news this weekend after all the happenings in the world.
You did not find out what was going on in the world till it was too late. And there were not a lot of successfully married people on nuclear submarines. The divorce rate is really high.
Yeah.
I was single, so.
That helps. Why did you choose to get out of the Navy?
So I met my wife in Hawaii, and I was going to do 8 years in the Navy. That was my plan all along. They gave you back then, and this was a long time ago, they gave you a $30,000 re-enlistment bonus for 2 years. That was a lot of money in the early 90s. But I met my wife, and we decided to get married. And being on a nuclear submarine is not conducive to being married.
Yeah.
So I got out after 6 years. I got out after one hitch because I wanted to get married.
Sounds like a good reason to me.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that worked out well.
Yeah, we just spent our 30th anniversary in Europe. We were in Vienna, Bratislava, and Budapest.
It's always fantastic when it works out that way. And congratulations on the 30 years.
That was my 38th and 39th country I visited, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice. So you went out of the Navy and became an electrician?
So I got out of the Navy, and I actually sent out resumes all over the country. I sent out over 1,000 resumes because I wanted a job. And I sent resumes to 48 states. And I got job offers to work in nuclear power, the Los Alamos labs as an operator, a weapons disposal facility in the Aleutians, to be a trainer for the post office, to work at Intel as an operator making chips, and an offer to go to Saudi Arabia and be an electrician in the oil fields.
Wow.
And I actually picked nuclear power. And we went to Nebraska. I spent a couple of years working at a civilian nuclear power plant north of Omaha. I have actually operated a crane and moved irradiated fuel rods. I have been to the North Pole itself. I am not the normal CPA. And after that, we went from rotating 8s to rotating 12s as far as shift work. I hated it. So we moved to Kansas City, Missouri, where I became a licensed electrician. My wife took a job with a CPA firm. She had been a bookkeeper and had a degree in accounting. And we spent a couple years, 2.5 years in Kansas City, Missouri. My dad died. My mom was struggling a bit, and we moved back to Fort Wayne. I became a licensed electrician in Kansas City.
I'm absolutely fascinated by this career, spectrum, from the Navy to just doing the most interesting stuff. I'm trying to get my brain around then how do you go from doing all this cool, fun, exciting stuff to becoming a boring old accountant? What is the decision-making process?
So we moved back to Fort Wayne, and I took a job with the Dalton Foundry. And if you've never worked in a foundry, that is the worst job around.
Okay.
I spent about 6 months working at a foundry. It was tough. And I moved to work at a Pepsi plant where I was their electrician and basically more of an instrumentation and controls guy there. And I did 6 months there. And then I went to the Halex Corporation where I was the maintenance and purchasing manager at a factory. By the time all that was done, it was 2004. I had spent one trip moving some machinery to China. When I did that, SARS broke out and we started dropping bombs on Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And my son was a week and a half old when I had to go over there. So I decided I had to get out of that profession. And we were on the verge, just the verge of Karina, my wife, making more money than me. And I was very uncomfortable with that because Karina does more around the house. Karina does more with our kids. And my ego was not going to take that well. It wasn't at all. I can admit that. And so she had started a CPA firm out of our house. She'd been a CPA for a couple of years. I worked for her part-time. I liked it. I went back to college and got a degree in accounting, and the rest is history. But what drove me to do it? She wasn't going to make more money than me. It wasn't going to happen.
I'm just so fascinated, Mike. It is one of the most unconventional sort of paths to becoming an accountant I've ever heard. It probably is the most unconventional path I've ever heard. And I'm trying to clearly a smart guy, right? You're working with, in the Navy with, nuclear, whatever the heck they call
nuclear reactors.
The reactors, that's the word. See, I wouldn't be smart enough to manage those stuff. Into all these really interesting jobs, became an electrician, then an accountant. I guess there's a lot of problem solving and logic that comes along with it. So it sort of runs down the same path. Me and my brother are extremely different, but similar. He became a civil engineer. I became an accountant, but our brains operate the same way in terms of problem solving. So I can sort of see how those paths go along each other, but it's almost hard to believe that this is real. Am I talking to AI right now, or is this a real journey that I'm listening to?
It's really because Karina was an accountant,
mm-hmm.
and I worked for her part-time and liked it. Otherwise, and what's really maybe more fascinating is when I went back to college, I had a plan. Are you ready? A serious plan. I figured I'm a licensed electrician. I've been a member of 3 unions. I've been a member of management for several years. If I go back to college, I get a degree in accounting. I spend 2 years working for my wife's company and become a certified public accountant. you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out and I'm going to become a plant manager of a steel mill or a big facility, because who else is going to be able to say they carried tools for 19 years? They're a licensed electrician and they're a certified public accountant, right? That was my plan. I never sent a resume to any of those companies because I liked running my own CPA firm with my wife. But my plan was to go be, the manager of a steel mill. That was, or something like that. That was my battle plan. And it never.
Well, you jumped into a totally different battle plan, and now you've been running that firm for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And you and your wife have been doing that together the whole time?
Yep. We added a third partner on January 1st, 2011, because we decided we needed somebody that could break ties. Because when you're married and you each own half, it didn't happen much, but man, we don't share clients. We do our own thing. And in fact, we often laugh, but we have a 4,000 square foot office and we're in diametrically opposite corners of that office.
Whatever makes it work. My wife and I, we work together, but decisions fall on me. So it's a slightly different dynamic, but it does take a little bit to work with a spouse, right? There's a lot of boundaries that you got to set on a day-to-day basis to make sure that, personal and business don't overflow with each other. As somebody's been doing for 20 years and been married for 30 years successfully, what advice would you have for people who are trying to get into some sort of business venture, like an accounting firm, with the spouse?
So believe it or not, there's a lot of people who are in accounting firms with their spouse. I think I know at least 20 couples that do this. The key for us is we do most things together. Karina and I always have. We get along well. She's my best friend. But I think having separate clients and not messing with each other's clients is the key. I don't know most of Karina's clients. She doesn't know most of my clients. We just operate separately and we have very, very different methods. My wife is a very soft touch. She's probably more friendly with a lot of her clients than I am with mine. I have more of a business blunt, tell you what to do type of relationship.
Yep.
But I don't try to get her to change to be like me. And she doesn't try to get me to change to be like her.
Knowing that you know how each other operate, is there any times where you interview a client and you realize actually that's a better role for her?
Yes. We've done that 3 or 4 times. And, one of the most epic ones was she had a client that was driving her nuts because he wouldn't listen to her. That client, they got divorced and she moved him to me.
Okay.
Basically. And it worked out great ever since. But when we onboard new clients, we ask a lot of questions now. And we have 3 partners. And depending on how they answer them, we may choose to push them towards a different partner.
Okay. I mean, that seems like it's understanding your different personalities, understanding your processes, what you guys are trying to achieve, and then having a final process to put it to the right person at the end of the day.
Well, I take a lot of our really complicated clients. Neither of my partners like that. My partners both like simpler. One likes restaurants, one likes realtors and real estate. And then there's personality differences.
That's just knowing your team, right? Like that's just one of the crux of business, understanding what personalities you have, what type of work they like, and then making sure the right people get the right work. Do you ever run into a situation where you sometimes get that wrong in terms of the matching of clients?
Oh, yeah. And if it goes wrong, it's very less likely with hers. It's more likely with mine. When I take on a new client, we have a very blunt conversation. And I say, look, I'm a blunt guy. You will never leave a meeting with me without knowing what I think. Occasionally, somebody finds that offensive, and I'm okay with it. And I say that to every new client because I don't like people who beat around the bush. So I don't beat around the bush. I mean, I just had a meeting this morning with a client of 17 years where I convinced them to close their business and hang it up.
Wow.
Because they're just not making enough money to justify it.
Yeah.
It's a hard conversation to have. And I don't think my wife would not have the conversation because it's awkward, right?
Yeah.
People get really attached to what they're doing. And I would have helped her if she kept it going, but it didn't make sense for her to keep it going. I'm the guy that's going to tell you hey, it's time to close. You're not making enough money. Look at all the time you put. Look at all the risk you put. Let's figure out a way to end this by year end.
Yeah, those are tough conversations, and we're seeing them more and more these days. The type of conversations we have to have with clients where it's just like, it doesn't make sense. Here are your options. You can either make these changes or start considering it might be the end of the line, and maybe have to try something else.
I have actually made it a point over the last 3 years to convince a lot of my clients to close their business. I'm down to 2, and one of them I met with today, and the other one has agreed to it, but I only have 2 left that really should not be running a business. But I've had to be pretty aggressive to get to that point.
What advice would you give other accountants to allow them to be better at having those conversations?
I think the only way you can be better at having those conversations is to be confident in yourself and your opinions. I think it also helps if you have a very large funnel of potential new clients coming in, so that it's easy for you to afford the financial loss of losing a client.
Yep.
But I think in the end of the day, what's most important to me is being able to look in a mirror and say, did you give your clients good advice? And I give advice people don't want to hear. I do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because it would really bother me if somebody said, I wish you'd have told me that 10 years ago. I don't really have that issue at my firm.
Yeah.
I don't. And occasionally I lose clients over it. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, honesty has to be the right policy, right? Sometimes these hard conversations have to be had. And if somebody in their life is not having them, for whatever reason, we know sometimes people hide the truth from those closest to them.
Oh, yeah.
This is a trusted relationship that we have with our accountant. It's a very personal relationship. And I personally think your accountant should have these conversations with you. They should be able to stick up their hand and be like, you know what, I think you're going down the wrong path. And, it could be as straightforward as like, you should probably close this down, or it's starting to look like you're going to have to close it down. We're going to have to make some adjustments. Are you willing to make those changes?
Yep, I agree.
But those are the tough ones. And, I know, I've got a team behind me, and I know a lot of them would be very uncomfortable having those conversations. And I know a lot of time that's where I'll step in and be like, hey guys, maybe we need to talk. Things aren't going so smoothly. There's always warning signs, even if it isn't, totally in the numbers. Payments get slower. They stop taking their own salaries. There's those warning signs where you can start having those conversations with them and be like, you're also not paying yourself. Does this make sense for you to be working those 60, 80, 100-hour weeks to keep your business going, and there's nothing for you? For an accountant, it's really important for us to be able to be aware, not just be ticking boxes all the time and be like, this is just a compliance exercise. We really need to be there to support our clients. And sometimes supporting them is having those conversations, even if there is a high risk of they won't be around tomorrow because they didn't like what they heard.
I think the other reason maybe that I'm willing to give that advice is, I just turned 58. I've done a lot of different things. I'm a pretty confident guy. If you're an accountant who's 27, you may not be comfortable telling your 50-year-old client that they should hang up their spurs, right?
Yeah.
I get that. But I started later in life, and I think it's changed how I do things, to be honest with you. I also think having a background in other things totally changes things. I have a lot of blue collar clients. I have a lot of clients who run electrical businesses, plumbing businesses, et cetera. And they're always like, man, you actually know what we're talking about. I'm like, in general terms, I do. I know what an air compressor is. I know what a pump is. Yeah. I understand what this stuff is. And they're not used to that.
Yeah, no, that is very different. It's, like we serve the wine industry. I can talk the language. I can talk about their products. But if they get into the technical details, I have to put up my hand and be like, sorry, guys, like that's outside of my area of expertise. I'm just an accountant at the end of the day. I can point you in the right directions based on the numbers, and maybe I can't have the hard conversations the same way because I don't have the same life experience, but I can show you in the numbers where things are going wrong. Like the gross margin's gone down by 5% every year for the last 3 years. That is problematic. You're now below the market average. Like these are all signs that your business is heading in the wrong direction.
One of the wildest things that I did is, so I moved some machinery to China in 2003 for a company that I left in August of 2004 when I went to college. But for the next 5.5 years, they kept paying me to sign a contract to say I would go over there and fix the machines if they went down. And on an emergency basis, they paid me a retainer. So I was a CPA who was getting a retainer while I was a CPA and running an accounting firm to rush to China, to Shenzhen specifically, if that plant went down, to get it back running. That is not probable. That's some semi-unique, right?
Yeah. Your whole story is extremely unique, Mike, and it is interesting for me that you had this whole multiple careers before the accounting career, and now you've been running a practice for 20 years successfully. What's one simple piece of advice for anybody that's planning on starting their own firm today that you would give them before they get started?
So I'm going to say there's two. I'm going to say the first one is you should raise your prices every year without exception. Prices go up, you become more valuable, you should raise your prices. Second, I'm going to say is you're not alone. When my wife started our firm, she was alone. She didn't have anybody she could call. She didn't have anybody she could talk to. She was by herself. That is a scary place to be. When I joined, there was 2 of us. Mm-hmm. When Brent joined, there were 3 of us. But we didn't know a lot of other people. But now I know a ton of people. And honestly, X has changed that. LinkedIn has changed that. And communities like the one I run, the collaboration room, have changed that. I actually have a group of new firm owners in the collaboration room that I meet with every other month. And they basically can pick my brain for an hour. And I have like 3 sessions that I teach. But you don't necessarily have to join a community. But what you need to do is you need to develop contacts. You can develop them on social media. You can develop them in a community. You can develop them in your community live, but it's getting harder and harder.
Yep.
Because what I have found is if I go to a live CP and there's 200 people, the only guy walking around talking to strangers is me. Yep. There's nobody else doing that, right? You can try, but it's hard. And if you try to talk to local firms around you, a lot of them are a bit standoffish and afraid you're going to try and take their clients, try and take their employees. And I've never been that way. I'm always like, look, man, if you pay your employees more, maybe mine will switch to you. Pay them what I pay mine and you won't have a problem. I have 600 potential new clients that call me this year. I only have 900 clients. There's an infinite number of work out there. I don't know why people are this territorial. But if you're in an online community with people outside of your little area, then people are a lot more open. That has changed. So I think the key is to not be alone.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. And I'm always intrigued by, I try to talk to people within my own, realm of accounting as well that sort of service the same type of clients. And I always they're clearly shocked when I'm like, I ask them a question or refer them a client and they're like, what are you doing? Like this, like, no, we're not, yes, we're competitors, but we're not competing. Like there's enough clients. There's, 10,500 wineries in the US. I have 160 of them. I have a very small share. You guys have the same or less. There's plenty of work to go around. So let's stop being so scared of taking work from each other because we're going to learn way more by having honest conversations with each other.
The accounting industry is about 1/3 people understaffed. Yeah. I'm spending $0 and 600 people are calling my firm a year.
Yep.
There is an infinite amount of work out there. Community is good. Join one, join social media, and ask for help.
Yeah, I agree. And on the in-person one, one of the things that I found, which is I find very frustrating when I go to a live in-person event, nobody is really willing to have honest conversations. Like, how are things going in your firm? Everybody's firm is doing fantastic. No problems. Everything is, sunshine and rainbows. And I'm like, guys, like it's not possible. There's no ways that all of us in the same room are just absolutely hitting the roof out. Like we're so successful. There's no issues going. But I feel like when people get in person with each other, the tail feathers pop out. We got to show off as much as possible. I'll take this one little piece of good and I'll turn it into 10 pieces of good. And, maybe that is the social media sort of world and everybody feels like they have to, show the best side of them all the time. But when you're in that live person, people are tending to just show the good stuff and we're not willing to talk about the bad stuff. when you go to social media, when you go to communities, and I've joined a couple over the last couple of years, which I'd never done before. I'm 18 months into that sort of experiment in my life. I find it way more value adding to my life because people are willing to talk about the bad in those environments. Somehow, because it's sort of behind closed doors, they feel a little safer to be able to be like, I'm struggling to hire, I'm struggling to keep clients, I'm struggling to find the right client, I'm struggling to decide what I'm doing. And just from that standpoint, I think it's totally worth the whatever fee they're willing to charge, because you get into a room where people are then like-minded, willing to have honest conversations, and those honest conversations will help you grow. Because these positive, super outlook pictures of our lives all the time is helping nobody.
Pretty much all the communities that I'm familiar with charge between $75 and $180 a month.
Yep.
And if you go into one of these communities, and for example, mine this week has 5 live sessions.
Wow.
If you can just find one live session that you pay $75 to attend, and you get one piece of advice that helps your firm, you have more than paid for it. And I hear you, and I totally agree with you, but I love having events where, hey, we'll have an hour event on how to run a small firm, and you can just ask me questions for an hour.
Yep.
It's a blast.
Yep.
Right? I like it. I'm confident enough to say it. Sometimes I say, I'm not so good at that, but here's what I should do, but I haven't been able to get this done, right?
Yep. No, that honesty is what we all need to put out there a little bit more, because we learn a lot more from being honest, and there's a lot more value to be had, especially in a room, when you're with peers and be like, hey, I'm struggling with X, so what are you doing? And you start getting a little piece of advice, and then, even the person who's saying thinks they got it all right, somebody else will add some content or add a thought. Now I've got something to go and improve it. There is always room for improvement, and having honest, real conversations really makes a difference. And like you said, find the time, right? I try and take time every single week to do some sort of training. Could be LinkedIn Learning, it could be a live session, it could be one of the groups that I'm part of, it could be just listening to a random podcast on accounting, which I don't do a ton of, but I find time for it every week. And I believe anybody who's trying to run their own firm needs to find time every single week, even during busy time.
I agree. And I think one of the most valuable things you can do is maybe join a mastermind group.
Mm-hmm.
I run one inside our community for big firms, and it's basically firms with 5 or more people. And there's between 8 and 14 of us that get together once a month. Sometimes you can't make it, sometimes you can't. And we just talk about whatever people want to talk about. I think the last session we talked about AI, we talked about marketing, we talked about CPE, and we talked about a specific technology issue that one of us had. And we just kind of go around the group and, hey, here's how I dealt with this. How did you deal with it? And the prior one, we talked about maternity leave policies. We talked about short-term health insurance policies. We talked about AI again. AI seems to be coming up a lot. Specific software seems to be coming up a lot. How are you handling this? But I'll tell you, if you can get a group of 15 people from firms similar in size to yours, it is amazing what you can teach each other.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I love doing that, if you can't tell. I mean, I taught some CPE, I taught some college classes. I like helping people, so it works for me.
Great. So tell me about the collaboration room. How did that get started?
So one day I counted up all the different firm owners that had reached out to me that I had answered questions for, and it got north of 140.
Wow.
And it was all through X. And people like, hey, Mike, how do you do this? Hey, Mike, how do you do that? Hey, what are you doing here? And I just kept having all these one-on-one email chains and one-on-one direct messages and one-on-one phone calls. And I got overwhelmed. I talked to 140 people in 18 months. And I got to be thinking about it. And I thought, man, this is really eating my time. I need to create something where instead of one-on-one, I can do one-to-many. Probably half of those people are members of the collaboration room right now, right?
Wow.
Because I help them once and they figure, well, they'll get help again. Yeah. Now, it's not just me helping them. We have 6 coaches. We've got a large group of people, but the whole driving point of it was I did not want to continue to do everything one-on-one.
Yeah.
You know, for example, this week I'm doing, I think, my 5th session on marketing, and it's going to be about, hey, I'm going to get over 600 people to call me this year, but I'm changing my system, and here's what I'm going to change so that next year I get 700. Well, those are very well attended sessions because a lot of people want more people to reach out to their firm without spending money. Those might be my most popular sessions, is the marketing ones. I like marketing.
How did you learn to like marketing?
So Karina was in charge of the marketing until I joined. And then I kept asking her where everybody came from. And she knew. She kept an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
But I'm going to say she drove me a little bit nuts. And I needed it to be organized. And if you want to know, I can tell you every direct mail campaign our firm ever ran, because we used to run a bunch of them. I can tell you how many people contacted us, what % we closed, and how much revenue we generated that year and the next year from each campaign. I track everything. Yeah. And if you're not tracking everything, you are not doing it right if you're spending money.
Yeah.
I don't spend money, and I still track everything. Everybody that contacts us, we know where they come from, and we keep track of it. It's a passion of mine. How am I good at marketing? You just have to show up. Now, that's not what you used to have to do when we started marketing back in 2005, 2003, 2007. There was a lot of competition, right?
Yep.
There isn't anymore. Now you cannot market and get a lot. But man, if you decide to market, you can get a ton. Because in the old days, everybody was marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, very few people market. So if you market now, you'll be very successful. I don't know why I like marketing. I just do. I'm a very organized person. I market in an organized fashion. And in our space, the key is to show up. If somebody reaches out to you and, is interested in becoming a client, don't contact them 4 months later.
Yep.
Talk to them quickly. Make a determination if they're a good client. If they're not, tell them no and move on.
It's one of the pieces of advice that I tell everybody. If you want to be better than 99% of accountants out there, respond on time, quickly, and give the right answer straight away, and you will blow the minds of the people that you're dealing with, because they're still waiting for somebody that they reached out to 6 months ago that hasn't responded to them.
Fact.
What is your favorite piece of marketing that you're doing at the moment that works for your firm?
My favorite piece of marketing that works for my firm. So since we're not spending money, we're really not actively marketing at all.
Mm-hmm.
If the only thing that I think somebody could consider that I'm doing actively to market is I have some referral sources that I occasionally will reach out to and groom them for more referrals. But it's so non-competitive now, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You just have to answer the phone, answer the email, because you're in a different place than I am. I'm in Fort Wayne.
Yep.
I love Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
Half the people who graduate college flee Fort Wayne. My kids both left Fort Wayne, as an example. The average CPA firm owner in Fort Wayne is at least 10 years older than I am. They're retiring in droves.
Yeah.
So there really is not competition where I am. So I don't have to. I just do a good job for my current clients and they send me more.
Well, that's good marketing right there, right? Do good work for your current clients, and hopefully they tell their friends, or you ask them to tell their friends, and that brings new people to the door. 20 years in business, how has running this firm changed in those 20 years?
Well, in the beginning, it was just Karina. Then it was just me and Karina. Then we had part-time people. And now there's 10 of us. We could grow to be much bigger. We just don't want to. I guess what's the difference? We make a lot of money now. Money's not an issue anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When money's not an issue, you decide that you don't need to grow as much. You learn that you can get rid of bad clients. Getting rid of bad clients is a very key thing to know how to do. And now what we're more trying to do is empower other people to step up. Right? There's not as many alphas in the accounting world as we would like. Trying to make betas alphas, there's a lot of work to get that done.
Yeah. No, that is tricky. It is always interesting when your firm is established and you have belief in yourself and the process you do, how much easier it gets to make those difficult decisions.
And I'll tell you, it's really easy to make those difficult decisions when 600 potential new clients are reaching out to you a year.
No, for sure. Yeah. So strong funnel makes everything a lot easier, because one bad client can be replaced with 600. Well, no problem then, right?
We've been over 400 since 2000.
Wow.
So we actually turned all of our marketing off in 19.
That's a great place to be.
It is.
And if you're especially in the tax space, that's the goal you're looking for, a place where you can sort of be an order taker, right? Rather than having to sort of be a salesperson. It is a good, comfortable position to be in. But clearly, if that sort of started to slow down, you've got ways to turn it back on and turn the funnel, open the funnel up again. You say you maintain some referral partners, which is always important. It's one of the things that I tell other accountants that are trying to start their firm. Build those referral partnerships. They will be important. They will start pushing people towards your funnel so you can get the clients in, and then those clients can feed their friends, and that will build the funnel even wider. So, starting with referral partners is always great. Doing some social media stuff that helps. Running some direct campaigns can work, but really it comes down to get people talking about you for the right reasons. Send people to your website or wherever you collect that documentation from, and eventually it just starts churning. And that's what you're looking for. You're trying to get the churn and get the people coming to the door, knocking at the door, asking to work with you.
It does. And it takes years to get that going. I mean, since we don't pay for money, we're still getting 400 plus people contact us from Google.
Wow.
My website is ancient. It's old. It's not very good, but I have a blog attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
I update blog posts, which updates my content on Google.
Yep.
I'm still in the top 10 on every search term I want. So it's just organic.
Yeah. That's where
it wasn't easy to get to that point.
No.
I used to be first, second, or third in everything I wanted.
Yeah, it's always fun when you are there, but I see a lot of the search terms that I would love, but I'm not willing to spend the money that some of the bigger firms are spending to take those top spots. I'm happy to hang out in 5-6 positions sometimes as well.
But you can also organically build it without paying for it. Yeah. But you're in a different market than I am. Yeah. And in Fort Wayne, people are not marketing.
Yeah.
Other firms. Most firms are full.
Yeah. Makes sense. There's a lot happening in the accounting world right now, and there's a lot is changing. What is the big change that you see coming in the next 5 years that would affect people running firms and how they're running their firms?
I think it's a combination of two. I think it's AI is probably the giant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you're going to see the number of firm owners who retire is probably going to increase. If, whether you like or dislike, it's irrelevant. If one big beautiful bill passes, it will drive some people out of the accounting industry because they just don't want to learn a new tax code. And it makes a lot of changes as currently written. I think there's a lot of people who are just tired and they just want to be done. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for people to start their own firms.
Yeah, that bill is scary. I'm a person that's never done taxes before, never even completed my own tax return. But, and it's for that particular reason that things always change. I would have probably burnt out as an accountant within 5 years if I had to have gone into tax. It just seems like a lot.
A lot do, and I actually still like doing tax returns. But I don't just do tax returns. I mean, we do a lot of payroll, we do a lot of bookkeeping, we do a lot of advisory work. So my standard day, there really isn't one. I do different things every day.
Yeah, that definitely helps. Mike, are you guys using AI in your firm or plan to use it in your firm?
So we're mainly currently using paid Chat GPT, but we're experimenting with a couple of others right now. I just demoed software that I'm pretty excited about, but I'm not going to talk too much about it until I play with it because you can't believe what the salespeople said, but they kind of wowed me with what they showed me. And it's basically software that combines OCR technology and AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to help automate moving data from PDFs into tax software.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think that's going to be pretty neat. I think AI is going to change a lot. I don't think that AI is going to replace accountants, but I think AI or accountants who effectively use AI will have a significant competitive advantage over those who don't.
100% agree with that statement. I think that is the crux of it right now is start getting comfortable with it because it is going to be everywhere. And if you know how to use it and use it well, it will give you a big advantage over the other other firms.
And I think the problem is there's so much, and it's not been refined, that a lot of us are spending a lot of time trying to figure it out. And some of that time's wasted. But like you said, you have to be familiar with what's going on. And I don't know that a lot of us are as familiar as we should be with what's going on. But I think the next year or two, that better change for most firms, or they're going to have a problem.
No, for sure. I feel like I use AI a lot, but when I actually start looking at it, I use it very little. So if I think I'm doing a lot and I'm doing a little, the ones who think they're doing a little, you need to make changes today.
I think so.
Mike, what's the best piece of advice you'd give somebody that's entering the accounting industry today?
I think if we're probably talking about a college grad,
or somebody like you who's or somebody like you who's changing careers and decided to come into the accounting space. Anybody that's entering the space for the first time, what would you tell them?
I think people should be pretty careful where they choose to work the first time. I think that public accounting has this history of being a pyramid. It churns people out. It discourages a lot of people. I tend to think people are probably better off working for smaller firms that care about them. I think that when college students talk to me, I suggest they maybe double major and maybe technology related double major. And I think that young people who are pretty strong with AI are going to have a pretty good advantage when they come into firms if they understand that. I would be very interested in a person that had a double major in accounting and AI, for example. I think that'd be a pretty good major to unleash on the world. I think it's be choosy, and if you detest it, leave. Go somewhere else. Small firms, they're not all good. Some are bad, some are good. Big firms, they're not all bad, some are good. Middle firms, same way. But go somewhere where you're happy. Yep. And there's a generational shift in accounting firms that's been going on for a long time. I'm 58. I've worked a lot my entire life. It's just the way I was raised.
Yep.
My younger staff, they don't want to do that, and that's okay. So I'm trying to design a firm so they don't have to. I'm cutting my hours 100 a year net, because otherwise I don't think that I will be able to find people who want to replace my wife and I unless we're working the same hours they are. Because that's what leadership is leadership is putting yourself in their shoes and being willing to do anything.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think it's sometimes hard for some of us to hear that if we want it to be a great place where people want to work and spend a long time of their career, it's not about molding people into who you are. It's making sure that you're constantly adjusting to the changing behaviors and trends of the people that are coming through. And that doesn't mean bending down and, whatever you say, but understanding that there's going to be these generational shifts, these different changes of thought process. And we have to adjust. We don't have to totally right turn, left turn all the time, but we do need to understand that we need to know who's coming in and what do they value and make those adjustments.
So when we interview people, we talk about a lot of things. And probably one of the most interesting questions I had from a person that interviewed said, how is your leadership different than that of a big firm? And I said, that's not a hard one. I said, 6 months ago, one of our employees came forward and said that our internal bathrooms were kind of nasty during tax season. And our cleaning service left. So we had to clean the bathrooms for 3 weeks until we had a new cleaning service. So how do you think we did that? And the person said, I imagine your newest person cleaned the bathrooms. I said, you would imagine that, you would be incorrect. I cleaned the bathrooms the first week. My wife cleaned them the second week. My partner, Brent, cleaned them the third week. We never got to the staff. The order we went in was top down, right? We cleaned the bathrooms because I don't do anything I don't ask you to do. But do you think that's going to happen at most firms? I don't know. I think a bigger firm, it would never happen, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they might even not even know that the toilets are in a bad shape.
But that's just different, right? You lead from the front. Don't ask people to do things that you don't do. If when I was the maintenance manager at a factory, one of my favorite stories is when they hired me, I was sat up on a mezzanine and I could look down on the whole plant floor. And I saw all this money passing between the operations supervisor and all my employees in the first week. And she had a notebook and she was writing things down and collecting money. And I went down there and I said, Cindy, what are you doing? And she didn't want to tell me. And I said, well, I see all these people handing you money. What's going on? They said, oh, there's a pool. How long it'll take them to get you fired? And I'm like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, who has the highest number of days? And she's like, me at 90. I'm like, you think I'll only last 90 days? And she's like, yeah, you're from the outside. You're not part of this group. They're going to get you. And, early on, it was a factory. We had 120 people. I was the maintenance manager, and our second shift person broke their leg. And I asked who wanted to cover second shift. And everybody looked at me and said, we don't want to cover second shift. And I said, okay, I'll cover second shift. So I did second shift for 2 weeks and did their job. And each day I would come in like 2 hours early because they would have to show me the things I didn't know how to do that kicked my butt. Mm-hmm. And then after 2-3 weeks, I wasn't asking them as many questions. And they came to me and they said, Mike, what works? And I never had a problem with my team again after that, because rather than make them do it, I did it. And they were also a little worried that if I learned everything, I wouldn't need them. Right. But that's leadership, right? I did it myself. I didn't even have one of them with me. I said, well, you guys do first shift. I'll do second shift. And they were stunned because nobody thought I would do it that way. But that's how you get respect from people, right?
For sure. Yeah. Lead from the front. Mike, I really appreciate your time today. We always like to end party conversations with just a little bit of something on your personal side that you'd like to share with us, just to get a better insight on who you are.
Better insight of who I am. I don't know. I would more say I think that what makes me happiest is the fact that I've traveled to 39 countries. I've been to the North Pole, and I've moved irradiated fuel rods. You will probably never talk to another accountant with that exact background.
100% rewind. Last part of Proto Conversations is our rapid fire. I have 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What would your death row meal be?
What would my what?
Death row meal be. What would your final meal on this earth be?
I think I'd want a steak and a loaded baked potato.
Sounds good. Mountains or ocean?
Mountains.
What is a quality you appreciate in a good friend?
Willing to listen instead of talk all the time.
Do you have a favorite book that you recommend everybody reads?
The Stand.
The Stand?
By Stephen King.
Last question. If you were stuck on a deserted island, what 3 items would you bring along with you?
Let's see. It's not going to have internet access, so that's going to suck. My goodness. 3 things. Well, I'd probably want to make myself comfortable when I sleep. I'd want a knife, and I'd want something so I could start a fire.
Perfect. Mike, appreciate your time. Thank you for being a guest on Proto Conversations.
You're welcome. It was fun.
And with that, we ended another Proto Conversations. Thank you for joining us in this journey of learning and inspiration. Today we've gained insight from our guest and taken another step towards understanding the diverse tapestry of leadership in business and accounting. Remember, each conversation is a step towards the positive transformation of business leaders. We hope our discussion has given you valuable takeaways to apply in your own career and life. Don't forget to subscribe to Proto Conversations on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so connect with me on social media channels. I'm most active on LinkedIn and would love you to join the conversation. Join us next time for more engaging stories, advice, and conversations that matter. Until then, keep striving for excellence, embracing growth. Thank you for listening, be kind, and goodbye from Proto Conversations.